Delinquents chained the girl to train rails. She escaped and secured them instead. Angelina Angie. Coronado had always been the sort of student who favored quiet corners over crowded gatherings. Nearing her final year in secondary, she had the unassuming figure of one who preferred novels to sports. Slender but not athletic, medium stature, with sable tresses that constantly slid onto her brow despite her efforts to keep them back. Her mocha complexion revealed the origins of her Puerto Rican foremother, a characteristic that hadn't escaped the notice of particular pupils at Oak Haven Academy since her family relocated to the sleepy Kentucky community 4 months ago. The relocation had been required after her mother's civilian job shift, but Angelina had become accustomed to not protesting such matters. What others didn't realize, what nobody at Oak Haven Academy could possibly fathom, was that Angelina had spent the preceding 9 years mastering Aikido and Krav Maga at various private dojos throughout Florida. Her mother, a senior legal advisor, had insisted on it after Angelina had been picked on at her prior school in Miami. The training had grown as routine as eating, but Angelina had vowed to her mother aggression was constantly the final option, to be utilized only when all else failed. Keep a low profile, stay dedicated to your studies, and permit your deeds to speak louder than your fists, her mother had conveyed before leaving for her latest assignment. You're tougher than you believe, but true toughness is understanding when not to display it. That guideline had served Angelina adequately during her initial weeks at Oak Haven Academy, even as she promptly discerned the school's tormentors. The ringleader was evident enough. Brittany Harding, a husky student nearing her final year with crimped flaxen hair and the sort of attitude that arose from never encountering resistance. She headed a small group that featured her second-in-command Tiffany Jenkins, gangly, tall, with empty eyes that appeared to delight in others' suffering, and Ashley Collins, ironically the only other Latina pupil in their grade, who seemed determined to demonstrate her dedication to Brittany by being twice as cruel to anyone who reminded the group of her own ancestry. The antiquated sandstone structure of Oak Haven Academy felt like a network of potential threat zones to Angelina. The cramped corridors between periods, the isolated fire escapes leading to the cellar, the obscured nooks near the gymnasium, all spots where a group could trap their target without intervention. The dining hall, with its lengthy boards and structured seating layouts, acted as the daily stage where social pecking orders played out in plain sight of 200 students. Angelina had succeeded in navigating these hazards for nearly 4 months through meticulous observation and tactical concealment. She consumed lunch solo at a remote board, kept her headphones in during passing times, and chose spots near exits in every classroom. The method functioned until the day she committed her first error. She assisted. Evelyn Bennett was a new pupil, tiny even for her age, with bulky eyewear and a stammer that rendered her a clear target. Angelina watched from across the dining hall as Brittany's crew circled her board, shoving her textbooks onto the ground, while Tiffany held her satchel just beyond reach. The other pupils carefully averted eye contact, abruptly enthralled by their food or devices. Please," Evelyn stuttered, grasping uselessly for her satchel. "I require those textbooks for—" "For what?" Brittany interjected, her tone resonating across the abruptly hushed area of the dining hall. "To weary us to death with your bizarre science experiments." Angelina felt her jaw stiffen as Ashley seized Evelyn's binder and feigned reading from it in an exaggerated stammer. The girl's face flushed crimson as tears began to form behind her eyewear. Surrounding them, 24 pupils continued their meticulously choreographed performance of intentional ignorance. Before she could restrain herself, Angelina was in motion. She traversed the dining hall with the smooth economy of movement that 9 years of martial arts training had ingrained in her muscle memory. But to the casual viewer, She merely seemed like another pupil walking purposefully toward the exit. "Excuse me," she spoke softly, appearing beside Ashley with the sort of abrupt presence that startled individuals. "You dropped this." Ashley whirled around, Evelyn's binder still in her hands. "What?" "Your manners," Angelina responded, her tone resonating just loudly enough for the surrounding boards to overhear. A few pupils chuckled, and Ashley's face darkened. Brittany advanced, her bulk casting a shadow over Angelina. "You got something to express, bean sprout?" The slur hung in the atmosphere like a tangible weight. Angelina felt the recognizable constricting in her chest, the rush of adrenaline that constantly preceded conflict. Her body yearned to move, yearned to demonstrate just how rapidly she could drop Brittany to the ground, but her mother's tone echoed in her mind. Final option only. "Merely believed she might need her binder returned," Angelina expressed, extending her hand toward Ashley. "For study hall." "Study hall?" Tiffany laughed, a coarse sound that sliced through the dining hall's ambient noise. "What study hall teaches spics how to harvest coffee beans?" More pupils were observing now, some extracting devices to record whatever was about to transpire. Angelina could see Evelyn in her peripheral vision, still frozen at her board, tears now streaming freely down her cheeks. "Return her the binder," Angelina conveyed, her tone steady despite the surge accumulating within her. Brittany stepped closer, near enough that Angelina could smell the girl's inexpensive cologne and perceive the minute scar above her right brow. "Or what, taco breath? You gonna act upon it?" For a moment, Angelina nearly did. Her body knew exactly how to respond. A smooth arm drag would place Brittany on her back in moments, potentially concussed from the contact with the ground. From there, it would be effortless to subdue Tiffany and Ashley before they could even process what had occurred. 9 years of training had rendered such actions as routine as breathing. Instead, she retreated. "Merely return her the binder." Brittany's smirk was predatory. "Observe this, crew. The small Latina's got some fight in her after all." She shoved Angelina forcefully in the chest, sending her stumbling backward into an empty chair. But not much. The dining hall erupted in the sort of nervous laughter that constantly followed these displays. Ashley tossed Evelyn's binder at her feet, its pages dispersing across the floor. The 3 girls swaggered away, high-fiving each other as they went. Angelina knelt to assist Evelyn gather her papers, her hands steady despite the fury coursing through her. "Are you all right?" She nodded, still weeping, and whispered a barely audible, "Thank you," before fleeing toward the corridor. That afternoon marked the commencement of Angelina's authentic education at Oakhaven Academy. Brittany's crew had identified her as a target worthy of their consideration, and they pursued their new pastime with the dedicated zeal of apex predators who had located fresh prey. It commenced subtly, shoulder bumps in the hallway that sent Angelina careening into lockers, accidental spills that left her satchel saturated with milk or soda, the constant barrage of racial slurs delivered just quietly enough to evade instructor intervention. Angelina endured it all with the identical stoic silence she'd maintained during their initial encounter, but each occurrence chipped away at her resolve. The worst aspect wasn't the physical harassment. Angelina had endured far worse during training sessions. It was the isolation. Her intervention on Evelyn's behalf had marked her as someone who would stand up to bullies, which paradoxically rendered her toxic to the other pupils. Nobody desired to be associated with someone who had painted a target on her back. Even Evelyn shunned her now, lowering her head and hurrying past whenever their paths crossed. Angelina understood. She was merely attempting to survive, identical to everyone else. But it stung nonetheless. 4 weeks into her new reality, the harassment escalated. Angelina was departing her final class of the day when she discovered her locker adorned with a crude illustration of a woman in a sombrero being deported over a fence. The words, "Go back across the Rio Grande," were scrawled across the metal in permanent marker. The hallway reeked of cheap paint. "Appreciate our masterpiece?" Brittany's tone resonated from down the corridor. She approached with her usual entourage, plus a few new faces who had apparently joined the entertainment council. Angelina gazed at the illustration, feeling something icy settle in her gut. The custodian, Mrs. Johnson, strolled past without making eye contact, her cart creaking as she vanished around the corner. "My name's Angelina," she conveyed softly, working her combination lock. "Not anymore," Tiffany laughed. "From this moment forward, you're Juanita. Juanita the alien." Ashley unlocked Angelina's locker and shoved her textbooks onto the ground, then kicked them down the hallway. "Whoops," she expressed with mock concern. "Better hurry, Juanita, or you'll miss your bus back to Tijuana." Angelina knelt to gather her scattered possessions, acutely cognizant of the small audience that had gathered to observe the spectacle. Amongst them, she spotted several pupils recording with their devices. By the following day, the video would potentially be circulating throughout the school. "You know what your dilemma is, Juanita," Brittany expressed, looming over her. "You believe you're superior to us, arriving here with your quiet, tough girl facade, like you're some sort of champion." Angelina straightened, her arms full of textbooks and loose papers. "I merely desire to go home." "Then depart," Brittany expressed, spreading her arms wide. "Nobody's restraining you. Board a bus, swim across the border, whatever you people do." The corridor had grown hushed except for the electronic chirping of device cameras. Angelina could feel dozens of eyes on her, anticipating to see if she would ultimately break, if she would grant them the aggression they were hoping to witness and share. Instead, she strolled away. That night, Angelina gazed at her ceiling and questioned if her mother had been incorrect. Perhaps there were circumstances where offering the other cheek merely invited additional abuse. Perhaps some individuals only understood one language. But each time she contemplated abandoning her principles, she recalled her mother's words. "The instant you transform into what you despise, they triumph." The breaking point occurred on a Thursday afternoon in late November. Angelina was strolling across the school parking lot when she overheard the sound of screeching tires and laughter. Brittany's lifted SUV swerved toward her, near enough that the side mirror brushed her satchel. The SUV screeched to a halt, and all three girls piled out. "Apologies, Juanita," Brittany called out, her tone dripping with false concern. "Didn't perceive you there. Perhaps you should wear brighter hues so individuals can spot you." A small audience had gathered, drawn by the disturbance. Angelina recognized some faces from her classes, pupils who had never spoken to her, but who seemed eager to witness whatever was about to transpire. "We've been contemplating," Tiffany expressed, circling around behind Angelina like a shark. "You've been at our school for months now, but you've never genuinely partaken in any of our traditions." Ashley extracted a length of chain from the SUV bed, and Angelina felt her blood transform to ice. "Precisely," Ashley added, her tone adopting an edge that hadn't been present before. "Moment for Juanita to learn about American customs." The derelict railway tracks ran behind the school, bisecting a stretch of woodlands that separated the campus from the residential district beyond. Angelina had strolled past them dozens of times, never imagining they would transform into the setting for her nightmare. "This is how we greet new pupils," Brittany explained, as they marched her through the trees, the small audience following at a safe distance like spectators at a Roman circus. "Particularly ones who believe they're too sophisticated to display proper reverence." Angelina's mind raced as they neared the corroded rails. She could break free, Even with her hands zip-tied behind her back, she knew at least 4 distinct methods to disable Brittany before the other 2 could react. But there were witnesses, devices recording, and any aggression she committed would be captured and shared throughout the school by dawn. More significantly, her mother's tone continued to echo in her head. Aggression is constantly the final option. But as Tiffany compelled her to her knees beside the tracks and Ashley began securing the chain around her ankles, Angelina wondered if she had ultimately located that final option. "Don't be concerned, Juanita," Brittany expressed, testing the knots. "The 5:30 cargo train doesn't pass through for another hour. Ample time for you to reflect on whether you desire to continue disrespecting us." The chain was industrial-grade steel, the sort Angelina had utilized during a construction course. But it was tied by amateurs who had learned their knots from YouTube videos rather than drill instructors. Even with her hands restrained, Angelina could perceive the vulnerabilities in their work. "This is insane," someone in the audience whispered. "We ought to alert the authorities." "With what?" Tiffany laughed. "Juanita's potentially illegal anyway. Cops would merely deport her." The group began to disperse as the reality of what they were observing set in. Some pupils hurried away, abruptly eager to be elsewhere. Others lingered, their devices still recording, caught between fascination and dread. Brittany leaned down close to Angelina's ear. "Next instance, perhaps you'll reconsider before acting the hero for some stammering freak." They abandoned her there, zip-tied and chained to the tracks as the sun commenced its descent toward the horizon. Angelina could overhear their laughter fading as they made their way back through the woodlands, followed by the nervous chatter of the remaining spectators. Alone on the tracks, Angelina closed her eyes and permitted her training to assume control. The zip ties were inexpensive plastic, the sort that could be fractured with the appropriate technique. She had mastered the method during a wilderness course at summer camp. Position the ties above your head, then bring your arms down sharply while yanking them apart. The stress would concentrate at the locking mechanism's weakest point. It required 4 attempts, but the ties ultimately snapped. The chain was more challenging, but Angelina had been studying it during the entire stroll through the woodlands. Ashley had utilized a square knot around her ankles, secure against tugging, but susceptible to the appropriate sort of twisting motion. With her hands free, Angelina was capable of working the chain loose in less than 7 minutes. She stood up, brushing dust from her attire, and listened meticulously. She could still overhear voices in the distance. Brittany's crew and their audience were potentially heading back to the parking lot, confident that their victim was securely trapped. Angelina smiled for the first time in weeks. She made her way back through the woodlands with the smooth silence of someone who had been trained to move unseen. The audience was smaller now, perhaps a dozen pupils clustered around Brittany's SUV, passing around devices to watch and re-watch the footage they had captured. "Did you witness her face when we chained her up?" Tiffany was expressing. "Thought she was gonna weep." "Should have captured a selfie," Ashley added. "Juanita's big railroad adventure." They were so concentrated on their devices that none of them noticed Angelina emerging from the tree line. She moved with predatory grace, covering the 50 yards of open ground without making a sound. "Having fun?" she asked softly. The effect was immediate and electric. Brittany whirled around, her face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and ultimately fear as she processed what she was seeing. "That's impossible," Tiffany breathed. "The chain was tied by amateurs," Angelina finished. She held up the severed zip ties and the coiled chain. "Did you genuinely believe YouTube was going to teach you better knots than a professional rigger?" The remaining pupils began retreating, abruptly understanding that they were witnessing something far more perilous than a simple bullying incident. Several devices continued recording, but now their owners held them with trembling hands. Brittany recovered first, her shock transforming into rage. You believe you're smart, Juanita? Believe you're tough? She reached into her SUV bed and extracted a crowbar. Let's witness how tough you genuinely are. Tiffany and Ashley moved to flank Angelina, forming a triangle with Brittany at the point. They had done this before. Angelina could perceive it in the manner they positioned themselves, the casual coordination that spoke of practiced aggression. 3-on-1, Angelina observed, her tone still calm. And you brought a weapon. Your parents must be immensely proud. Brittany raised the crowbar above her head. Shut up and... She never completed the sentence. Angelina moved with the explosive speed of someone who had spent 9 years learning to transform her body into a weapon. A smooth step and pivot took her inside Brittany's swing, and a palm strike to the sternum dropped the larger girl to her knees, gasping for breath. The crowbar clattered to the asphalt. Tiffany charged from the left, throwing a wild haymaker that Angelina slipped effortlessly. A foot sweep sent Tiffany crashing to the ground, where a precise application of pressure to her elbow kept her pinned and in discomfort. Ashley hesitated, abruptly realizing that she was confronting someone far more perilous than the quiet pupil they had been tormenting for weeks. When she ultimately committed to her attack, it was too late. Angelina caught her punch, utilized her momentum against her, and put her face first into the side of Brittany's SUV with a hip toss that would have rendered her instructors proud. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 40 seconds. Angelina straightened her shirt and gazed around at the stunned faces of her audience. Brittany was still on her knees, clutching her chest and making small sounds of distress. Tiffany lay on her side, nursing her elbow. Ashley was unconscious against the SUV, a thin line of blood trickling from her nose. Now, Angelina expressed, her tone resonating clearly in the abrupt silence. Let's converse about reverence. She strolled over to Brittany's SUV and retrieved the coil of chain. You desired to display me American traditions, she continued, methodically cutting the chain into 3 equal lengths. Allow me to display you one of mine. Brittany attempted to crawl away, but Angelina seized her by the shirt and hauled her upright. It's called consequences, Angelina explained as she began tying Brittany's hands behind her back with the identical sort of knots the bullies had failed to master. Very popular concept in legal circles. Tiffany had recovered adequately to attempt to flee, but Angelina caught her before she made it 12 feet. The girl's elbow was potentially sprained, rendering it effortless to subdue her as Angelina secured her hands as well. Ashley was still unconscious when Angelina tied her up, but she was breathing steadily. The blood from her nose had already ceased flowing. What are you doing? Evelyn Bennett's tone came from the edge of the audience. She had appeared at some point during the confrontation, drawn by the disturbance like everyone else. Angelina looked up from her work. Teaching a lesson in empathy, she expressed. They seemed to believe it was amusing to chain individuals up and abandon them helpless. I believed they might benefit from experiencing it themselves. She dragged all 3 girls to the flagpole in the center of the parking lot and secured them to it with the remaining chain. Brittany had recovered adequately to curse and struggle, but the knots were lawyer-grade now, tied by someone who had mastered from experts. "This is abduction!" Brittany shouted. "You can't do this!" Angelina knelt down so she was eye-level with her former tormentor. "You chained me to railway tracks," she expressed softly. "With a train approaching. That's attempted homicide." She gestured to the dozen pupils still observing from a safe distance. "And it's all on video." Brittany's face went pale as the implications sank in. "But here's the aspect," Angelina continued, standing up. "I'm not identical to you. I'm not going to abandon you here to ponder if you're going to die. I'm going to alert the principal, the authorities, and potentially the fire department to arrive, untie you." She paused. "Eventually." She extracted her device and began scrolling through her contacts. "While we await, perhaps you can contemplate how it feels to be helpless, to be humiliated in front of your peers, to ponder if the individual who has power over you is going to display compassion. The audience had grown as word spread throughout the school. Pupils were streaming out of the structure, drawn by rumors of a fight that had transpired very differently than anyone anticipated. Angelina could see instructors beginning to emerge as well, alerted by the disturbance. "Ms. Coronado," Principal Thompson's tone boomed across the parking lot as he approached with 2 security personnel. "What is the significance of this?" Angelina didn't flee. She stood calmly beside the flagpole, her hands at her sides, and awaited for the authorities to reach her. "These 3 pupils chained me to railway tracks, sir," she expressed simply. "I'm confident several individuals possess video evidence. I defended myself, then secured them here to prevent their escape before the authorities could arrive." Principal Thompson looked from Angelina to the 3 girls chained to the flagpole, then to the audience of pupils holding up devices. "Someone dialed 911. "I was just about to," Angelina responded, holding up her device. The next hour was a blur of police officers, paramedics, and very serious conversations. Angelina found herself handcuffed in the back of a patrol vehicle while Detective Miller reviewed device footage with increasingly dark expressions. "Girl," Detective Miller expressed when he ultimately approached Angelina, "you realize I have to arrest you for assault." "Yes, sir," Angelina responded, "but I also have to convey to you that what those girls did to you—" He shook his head. "Chaining someone to railway tracks is a felony. Multiple felonies, actually. False imprisonment, reckless endangerment, conspiracy to commit assault." He paused. "Your lawyer's going to have a field day with self-defense claims." The charges against Angelina were dropped within a week. The video evidence was overwhelming. Dozens of pupils had captured Brittany's crew, marching her to the tracks, chaining her up and abandoning her there. The district attorney called it the clearest instance of self-defense I've witnessed in 20 years. Brittany, Tiffany, and Ashley weren't so fortunate. All 3 were expelled from Oakhaven Academy and faced serious criminal charges. Brittany's family hired expensive lawyers, but the evidence was impossible to dispute. She was ultimately sentenced to detention and court-ordered community service. The shift at school was immediate and profound. Pupils who had shunned Angelina for months abruptly desired to sit with her at lunch. Instructors who had never noticed her before went out of their way to inquire how she was doing. The hallways felt different, less predatory, more welcoming. But the most significant shift was in Angelina herself. For the first time since arriving at Oakhaven Academy, she strolled with her head held high. She made eye contact. She smiled. "You know," Evelyn Bennett expressed one day as they collaborated on a chemistry project, "I never got to express my gratitude adequately for that initial day in the dining hall." Angelina looked up from her lab notes. "You don't need to express gratitude. We watch out for each other, correct?" She smiled, the first genuine smile he had witnessed from her since that day with her scattered textbooks. "Correct." 4 months later, Angelina received a letter from her mother, who had ultimately learned the complete narrative through official civilian channels. The letter was brief, written in her mother's characteristic no-nonsense style. "Daughter, heard about the railway incident. Proud of you for attempting to handle it peacefully initially. Prouder still that you didn't transform into them when you ultimately had to act. Aggression was your final option, identical to what we discussed. That's what distinguishes the good individuals from the bad individuals, understanding when to engage and when to cease. The bullies mastered that actions have consequences. You mastered that occasionally standing up for yourself alters everything. Both are significant lessons. See you at New Year's. Mom." Angelina folded the letter meticulously and tucked it into her wallet. Outside her window, she could see pupils gathering in the parking lot, their voices carrying on the afternoon breeze. Some were potentially conversing about homework. others about weekend plans. None of them were afraid. That, Angelina thought, was worth fighting for. 25,659 characters.